An unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good evening. So, tonight, in one of the shorter chapters of Ben's book, a mere 3 pages, we're going to look at one of the most important ideas in the Mahayana tradition, which means in the Zen tradition as well. And the title given to this chapter points to it. Samsara and Nirvana are not two. And the line from the song of Dharma Nature that this is a commentary on reads this way: life and death and nirvana are always identical. So the chapter heading simply replaces life and death with samsara. Nirvana remains constant between the two. And the chapter heading says that these two, samsara and nirvana, are not two. And the verse line actually says that they're always identical. So just a minor variation. Life and death is pointing to a couple of things. One of them is duality, of course. So we know we're entering into the realm of samsara as soon as we're entering into the world of duality. But yet, it also points to impermanence. And impermanence is true as a Dharma teaching, and it also has an imprint within the world of samsara. So it kind of traverses both of these realms. So in that sense, I like the verse line a little bit better: life and death in place of samsara. But let's go on a little bit further here. And there are actually only a few sections of Ben's very short chapter to begin with that I just want to focus on, because I think they will get us to the heart of this most important Mahayana teaching that can be so difficult to really absorb. The fact that samsara and nirvana are identical, are not two. So in samsara is nirvana. It kind of seems to contradict all notions of a path. A path seems to suggest that you're traveling, as the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell used to write about, traveling off to distant realms on this great quest. But what's being conveyed here is that the path both begins and ends here. And we're going to look at part of the text in this chapter that essentially says that. It begins here and it finds its completion here. That's the Zen hero's journey, is the journey to right here and settling in to right here and seeing all things, life and death, everything, right here. In fact, in the first part of Ben's text I wanted to begin with here. He says, the start of the path and the completion of the path are not separate. So important. In different phrasings, we keep coming back to this core teaching time and time again. The start of the path is right where we're at, and that's the completion of the path. There's nothing further we need to attain other than awakening right here, right now. Our entire path is right here at this moment. What more is there to seek? That's the root of our dukkha, is seeking for something more or something less if we're trying to shed something that's unpleasant. We want more or less. And this path is conveying this teaching of just being present, open with openness, with acceptance, and finding our path moment after moment in that way. So Dharma teachings aren't taking us off onto a distant journey. They are simply a guideline for finding our path right here. That's the whole sum total of Dharma teaching, is finding your way, your true nature right in this moment. So the start of the path and the completion of the path are not separate. Dogen in Genjo Koan expresses this in terms of here the way unfolds. Right here. This is your path. It's not that you have to move yourself to find a path, kind of our traditional view of a path, which has the markers, and you can tell how far you've traveled and how far to the next trail marker. Because people want that kind of guidance, whether they're walking out in a park or following a spiritual path. They're still looking for comparable guideposts, I think. And the Zen guidepost is that you've already arrived in terms of Dharma nature. It's here, now. And that the path is already complete right here and now. So we don't even need to complete the path. We simply need to see that it is complete right here and now. We need to awaken to that realization. And the note I scribbled in the margin here, to elaborate a bit more on it, is that your vow to enter the path leads inexorably to your seeing its completion right here and now. So the vow to enter the path is to awaken the importance of vow. And to recognize in this fashion that it's not a particular thing. It's not this or not that, which is why in Zen, so little is said about enlightenment, awakening. Because to say anything about it is really just creating more obstacles to confuse people, even though they feel the need for guidance. But yet, we have to be careful that we can't just dangle out there these objects and say, this is what it is, or this is what it's like. So the sum total of Dharma teachings can be seen as simply forms of guidance to lead us to our path, which is right here. What's arising right in this moment. And that's why for Dogen, Zazen was the central part of the practice. Because what is Zazen? It's being fully present right here and now. Zazen is the way to find our path, where it actually is, and to see that it's complete. Or as Suzuki would put it, perfect and complete just as it is, right here, right now. That's your path, wherever that is. So it doesn't have to be a particular place, under particular conditions. Hence the importance of this combination of samsara with nirvana. Right in that muddy water, the lotus blossoms. Our dharma nature flourishes. And another seeming, the next thing from Ben's commentary I wanted to quote from, and it's another seeming contradiction. He says, every overwhelming or barely noticeable moment of suffering that arrives in samsara, that arrives because things come to be and pass away, is inseparable from the cessation of all suffering from nirvana. So the arising of suffering that we experience in samsara, that arrives because things come to be and pass away, the realm of life and death, of impermanence, of constant change. That this is inseparable from the cessation of all suffering. In other words, the third noble truth, which is nirvana. So both suffering and its cessation are inseparable. Which maybe when we look at it in conjunction with this first teaching about the oneness of samsara and nirvana, helps to fill that out a little bit more for us. Samsara being suffering because of our delusion. Nirvana being the release from suffering because of our wisdom, our awakening. That they are inseparable. Just as samsara and nirvana are inseparable. In fact, all is inseparable. But this teaching about suffering and its cessation, the teaching of samsara and nirvana as being inseparable, really kind of gets to the core of our dualistic confusion. So that's what makes this one particularly notable example of things that in fact are one. And it would serve us well to take this teaching and really take it to heart and investigate it and sit with it and try to see the truth of it. Because if we're trying to escape suffering by finding the realm without suffering, then we really are creating an illusion that we're chasing after. That's not how we find the cessation of suffering. We find it right in the middle of the suffering. And I just earlier today, when I was at Whitehaven, it was a day with a high noise level taking place outside the building. And when I encounter that, I encourage the folks to stop focusing on their breath and now just focus on the sound. Because if you're focusing on something else, then the sound will keep intruding. But if you turn your focus to the sound, now the sound becomes one with the meditation rather than being a hindrance to it. That is your meditation. And all of a sudden, any dukkha that it's creating will drop off. So the release from dukkha is right from going right into it and putting your full focus there, rather than trying to eliminate it. Get rid of it. Get some earplugs or find some solution that will allow you to get rid of it. But your mind will continue to generate the thoughts about what a terrible thing. We should just cancel meditation today. But instead, in a fashion I think that bears a striking similarity to what's being described here, we go right to it. And right in the noise, we find the escape from it. That's kind of what's involved in seeing suffering and the cessation from it as being one and the same. We're not trying to run from it. It's already right there. It all comes back to this notion that the path is right here. The path to nirvana, right where you are. Whatever those circumstances are. So Ben goes on to say that samsara is precisely your body, and nirvana is precisely your body. Now, this kind of echoes Western spirituality as well, where the body was seen as kind of an impediment to the spiritual path, which also was part of the Buddha's initial search when he became a wanderer with his fellow ascetics, and they were depriving their body. No food, no sleep, all the basic necessities, were just distractions from uh, the spiritual side of reality. So they were uh, in a practice that would deny the body. But what's being said here is that nirvana is precisely your body, just as samsara is. So the solution clearly is not about denial of the body. That one can actually become very intimate with one's body, oneself. It's part of the study of the self that Dogen spoke of, to really have a deep understanding of your body. And that can be the path, because nirvana is not anything different from your body. Because everything is right here. The body, all of its afflictions, the things we want to get rid of. But they're also nirvana. So these are challenging teachings. They don't really mesh with our common way of seeing things in a dualistic fashion. So we can really struggle to understand them. And the only way we really can is not conceptually, but through practice, through experience, so that we can see it through our intuitive insight. We have to see it directly. We can't get there through our rational powers, because this flies in the face of our structure of rationality. And further in this vein, one of the great Huayan philosophers, Fa Zhang, wrote that because sentient beings are deluded, they think illusion is to be abandoned and think reality is to be entered. When they are enlightened, illusion itself is reality. There is no other reality besides to enter. Back to this notion of illusion, samsara, nirvana, reality, that it's all one. There is no separation. So illusion is not to be abandoned. And Dogen also teaches about this, about deluded beings, or sentient beings are greatly deluded about enlightenment. And enlightened beings are greatly, I'm stumbling here, deluded about enlightenment, and then greatly enlightened about their delusion, which is, I believe, from Genjo Koan. And I should take a moment just to make sure I'm rendering this correctly. Being deluded about enlightenment is seeing enlightenment as being free from delusion. So to truly be enlightened is to see exactly the truth that's being conveyed in this chapter. That enlightenment and delusion are one and the same. Our enlightenment is regarding our delusion. And that there is no other reality, as Fa Zhang puts it, to enter. Our illusion is reality. And here, maybe the imagery that I used in a talk during last weekend's session can help with the duck rabbit and the vase. So that as examples of illusion, which arises out of limited view, we can only see things at one time as a particular thing. So that's our limited view. But we can also, when we study those types of figures, we can kind of take the backward step, you might say, and see it in a broader scope. And we can see that one and that same figure contains actually multiple things. And so it is with all things. With all things. So illusion itself is reality, as Fa Zhang puts it. That everything we experience is limited view, so it's part of our illusion. And yet, Nirvana is right there. We can awaken right there. That is our field. Cultivating the empty field, as Hongja puts it. That's the field we're cultivating, is our field of illusion. But we cultivate it through our practice. And through that cultivation, we can see the nirvana, nature, the perfection, that everything is perfect and complete, just as it is. That's an awakened understanding of each thing. And furthermore, to bring in the teachings on emptiness, which have an important role to play here, Ben makes the comment that we can be aware that everything we think is a thing is not a thing. And that's really an important kind of I'll call it a mindfulness practice, that we understand that everything we encounter, that we respond to as if it's a thing, that we also have this realization that in reality, ultimately, it's not a thing because of the truth of emptiness, of no thingness. Nothing has that quality of being a thing. That's what emptiness points to. No thingness. Not nothingness, but no thingness. That's the true nature of all things. And that's such an important understanding to really be able to take in and begin to see things in that way. In fact, because I know some of you have at least dabbled in the jhanas, the seventh jhana is the focus on no thingness. So it even constitutes part of the jhana practice of total absorption, of deep concentration. So on the Eightfold Path, right concentration in the Theravadan tradition was seen to be pointing to the practice of the jhanas, which would include that contemplation of no thingness. And practicing with it as a jhana is to just that you have that single pointed focus on the no thingness of all that we encounter. Nothing has the quality of thingness, of something. Everything that's part and parcel of life and death, of impermanence, everything is in a constant state of flux. So being aware that everything we think is a thing is not a thing. It's mind, our mind, that makes us see a world of objects coming and going. But this is a profoundly limited view. There are other views, more enlightened views, that can see things as being a process, purely process, energy. Whatever metaphor we want to use to fill that role, to make sure that it's not something that carries with it that baggage of substantial being, of own being. Something exists on its own because it has substantial being. So this is also an important part of the Dharma truth that's being expounded in this chapter. And Ben makes an important point here. He says Nirvana is not the destruction of apparent objects. Rather, it is seeing that those objects are not absolutely or inherently real. So we don't have to suffer from our limited fixed views. And we don't have to cause suffering based on these views. So we don't need to destroy apparent objects because they're only apparent. There is nothing to destroy. If we attempt to destroy them, then we're treating them as if they do have self-existence. Rather, nirvana is seeing the true nature of these objects, that they are not inherently real. They're things that our mind fabricates as objects. But they're not inherently real. And that's why we don't have to suffer from these limited or fixed views. We can free ourselves from the dukkha that gets created by these views simply by seeing the true nature of things. And that's what our path is all about. Seeing our true nature, and in that way, at the same time, seeing the true nature of all things. To see that is to free ourselves from suffering. And this is the power of the teaching that samsara and nirvana are one and the same. That right in this world of our fixed, confused, limited views is nirvana. Is the world as perfect and complete just as it is. And in that understanding, we can sort of exhale a sense of release from the way we've gotten so caught up in our delusion. And we hold on to it so tightly. And we refuse to let it go. We view it as kind of like security for us. So that's why it's so challenging to have this understanding of the unity of samsara and nirvana. Because we seem to be giving up the fight. We seem to be surrendering almost. But that's not the case at all. Actually, we're coming to this deep understanding of the true nature of things. And rather than a surrendering, it's a liberation, which is a very different thing. So this is difficult material. I apologize if I haven't been up to conveying it sufficiently. But at least I think we've got some seeds planted out there to work with. But I can't emphasize enough the importance of this short little chapter, that this really can be seen as the heart of Dharma teaching, this union of samsara and nirvana, which is the hallmark really of all Mahayana traditions, all of them. This isn't just unique to Zen practice. So I think we've still got about 10 minutes or so, so I've covered what I wanted to from this chapter. So I will bow out and open things up for questions, comments. John?
The title of the chapter, where we're talking about life and death, nirvana and samsara being identical, and he says not two.
Yeah.
Of course, what I hear after that is not one.
Yeah.
Can you speak?
Yeah, no, and the not two kind of, it might have its origin in the verses on the faith mind, which, because the author that text is attributed to is the third ancestor, with Bodhidharma being the first ancestor in China. So this is very early Zen. In fact, the author of Verses on Faith Mind is considered to be primarily a Taoist teacher. So this is in the early stages of Buddhism intermingling with Taoism to ultimately become Zen. So this notion of not two is put out there because of the danger of going to one, and what will you say about that one? now you've created the path that can lead you to create an absolute that's actually not only one with the relative, but it's basically simply a repetition of the realm of the relative. We'll say this is true of it, and this, and this, and this, and this. And so to say not to is kind of a nice little, it almost sounds like Nagarjuna at work there in terms of his using negation to point to the reality. That to say anything positive about something is always kind of hazardous and can really get misused. So that's the power of just saying not to. It's kind of also echoing the Heart Sutra, the no to in front of everything, the qualifier. Know this, know that, know that. So not to. But don't turn around from that and then make something as one or whatever. Just say not to. That's sufficient. So that's my take on that.
I mean, I think it tends to be confusing when you say these things are identical.
Right.
But you could be identical and not be the same thing.
Yeah. It's kind of open. And I think openness is always the way. Yeah. Be open. Be open. Joe.
It seems like this chapter really strongly interlinked the focus beliefs between Zen and Hui, and the awakening through being in the present moment and awakening through the realization of the interconnectedness of all things.
Yeah.
And they kind of seemed like they blended the two together quite well.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good way of saying it. Yeah, because Huayan, because of the interdependence of all things, this is the teaching of suchness, that this moment arises because of that interdependence. So literally, this moment is everything. That's this sense of the identity. I think that's kind of part and parcel of suchness and interdependence. That nothing's excluded from it. Everything comes together to create this moment. And that's kind of the history of our realm, is that constant unfolding of this movement of all things in their interconnectedness, in their interdependence. But yet we create these objects and give them undue importance, like us as humans. We've given ourselves hugely undue importance, right? So we can really see that so clearly, as opposed to seeing the unity, the identity of all things. That's a whole different worldview. And many would say, I'd certainly be one of them, and that's a far more beneficial viewpoint for the sake of all beings. So, yeah. And Rannigan has got her hand up. Whoop, you're not coming through.
I'm sorry. No,
There you
no. I have, at my age, I have people dying around me left and right.
Yeah.
And one of the things in relation to what you're talking about is something that Busho Lan had in his book. And I think it relates to this and it helps me. I mean, at least once a week, I'm hearing about somebody that's at death's door. And what he said is, let it all come, let it all flow, let it all be until it's done. This is enlightenment. And that was in his book, Singing and Dancing, or The Voice of the Law. And can you comment on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think I probably could. It's this sense of openness that I'm always talking about. Openness and acceptance, they're very related. That if we're really awake to suchness, and as Dogen puts it, practicing suchness, we practice suchness by seeing things as just the manifestation of everything coming together. And I think Busho, that's what Busho is referencing with his description, is it's everything coming together to create all these different scenarios. And that's the absolute. The absolute is simply the universal, is another term used for that. And the universal means everything, even though there aren't any things. But we use the term. We could put brackets around it or draw a line through it, something that contemporary philosophers use to deal with these sticky issues, but still be able to talk about them. So everything is everywhere, I guess is another way of putting it. Kimberly.
What about the last part of that quote that Rannigan just stated about like go with it, flow with it until it's all done?
Yeah.
Can you talk about
Yeah. No, and I'll put it in the context of the talk tonight, because it is seeing this completeness. I think all done, to me, speaks to completeness. Even though it's a completeness that's still subject to impermanence. So it's not all done like in some fashion that there's an end point, like heaven is often seen as the end point. And that's what everybody's striving for. And then there won't be any more change. Which sounds kind of dull, as David Byrne pointed out many, many years ago. Heaven is a place where nothing ever really happens. But complete is just this sense of completion that we have on a moment-to-moment basis. So it kind of fits in with Suzuki Roshi's comment about everything is perfect and complete. And that's kind of its perfection, is its completeness. Completeness simply means it's part of this complete whole that is complete. So that's kind of the way I see it.
I'm still stuck.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess because I'm grasping or I my understanding is a little limited, because I see all done as complete.
Yeah.
As an end
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
And so right. Everything's always in process. So am I just taking that quote? And I know that we're trying to relate it to the talk tonight, but are we taking that quote from Basho? Am I taking that out of context a little bit? Is he specifically talking about death? Like the process of death?
I don't know that it's specifically about that. I think it's more universal. Rannigan maybe has a better feel for that because I'm not sure about its context. Because I do remember reading that passage. It's pretty noteworthy. It kind of sticks with you. But I forget how he placed that in terms of what he was trying to highlight.
I would look at home so I can look at it.
Yeah.
I have another question.
Sure.
What's the relation between suchness and no thing?
Well, they're kind of interdependent, which is could be seen as being a flip answer because everything's interdependent. So I could say that about everything, but that they're really, I think, if we look at it, because it's interdependence and emptiness that you're asking about, right? Because to be empty is interdependence. If everything had its own substantial being, then there'd be no interdependence. It would be what it is. And it's not dependent on anything else. We can look at ourselves in that light. Are we really these substantial beings, or are we so interdependent with everything else? So that's the emptiness and interdependency are just kind of intertwined. They go right together.
So suchness is.
And suchness is interdependence.
Because I see no thing as interdependent.
Right. And that is too.
Okay.
Yeah. And suchness is simply kind of pointing to our experience. That suchness is the way we experience things, arising. The arising and falling. That's why Tathagata, which is pointing to thusness, which is suchness. And Tathagata is thus come one and thus gone one. It means both of those. And that's a term used to designate the Buddha. So it's pointing to this rising and falling, suchness. It rises, it falls, it rises, it falls. So to see Tathagata as the nature of all beings, that's Buddha nature. That's the power of that term. Is all of a sudden, we think we're talking about this elevated spiritual figure. And suddenly the light bulb goes off. Oh my God, I'm talking about everything. The sacredness of all beings. That's what we're saying. That's suchness. That suchness is everything. Everything. The way it rises and falls. Thus come, thus gone. Buddha nature. Joe?
Was it Suzuki Roshi that said, "You're already perfect the way you are, and you could use a little improvement"?
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. When I first heard that, I had to think about that, and I really had to think, what did he mean about we're already perfect? And things are perfect the way they are, even though they could use some improvement in some cases. But I'm thinking, from my perspective anyhow, maybe he didn't mean it this way, but as far as whatever is in this moment is in its own dharma position, and everything that led up to it in the entire universe up to this moment in that thing could not have been any different. It is there, and therefore it is perfect. It couldn't have been any different.
Right.
It could still use some improvement, though.
Right. Exactly.
So I don't know what it was, but something in what you were talking about just triggered that thought in my mind. That,
Yeah. So because we are kind of driven to keep seeking improvement, and that's not a bad thing. But we can get kind of caught up in that too, and that becomes a fixed view and a limited view. That improvement is such a loaded thing. Improvement, from my viewpoint, I think it would be better. Somebody else might look at it very differently and say, no, that would ruin it. Because they see it as perfect and complete just as it is. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of, for me, the beauty of the Dharma is it opens this vast panorama of seeing things from all these different perspectives with no fixed view, but still deeply caring. It's not that we just become dismissive because I don't have a fixed view. We can still very deeply care about things, but with openness, rather than becoming a missionary with a mission. It's a very open mission, just to lead an awakened life. That's all. And trust in awakening. That's our trust, our faith. Faith in awakening. Where that will take us. Yeah. I think we've more than used up the remaining time, but that's been good. So let's go ahead and chant out. May our intention equally penetrate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. All right. Well, good night, everybody. And we'll be back here Saturday morning for Jukai class.